So what does it mean to have your art at the National Law Enforcement Museum?
It's a dream and something that I never would have expected or would have thought would ever happen in my lifetime. Never even thought to have something good enough to be in a museum. And so for me, it's like a total integration of a couple identities that came together from when I was younger and had art scholarships but never took them. But I also wanted to go into law enforcement and be a detective. And my friends in high school, when we took art together, they all went into art as a career, and I was the only one that did not. And so when I dabbled a little bit here and there, I say I experiment with art because I never took any professional lessons, but to have something that I did that meant so much, because it was supposed to be for an officer that died, and then to actually see it here in a national museum is probably one of the best sense of accomplishments, a once in a lifetime event for me and for my family as well. So yeah, I don't know if I can express it as well in words, but it's an honor.
That's great. So when did you begin your artistic journey and why?
So that question with the word journey definitely started with my career in law enforcement. So as I said, I went to school 4 years and took art, and we did what we did with instruction, and we made our pictures and things like that. But the actual journey began probably when I applied for the police department, and I did a self-portrait that I call my Nancy Drew. It was just a black and white pencil, and it's like, she's looking over, and as if there's somebody behind her and stuff. And that was when it started being on the department and knowing others. And I took my oath very seriously of protecting and serving the community. So every aspect of my job, whether it be the friends I made, my coworkers, the cases we had, the turmoil that we might have had with our personal lives, and maybe people that we arrested, everything all came together for me with emotion, with details, with memories. And it's the people that I encountered, which is what made my journey into my artistic expression come to life. So I didn't do like a whole lot of things. I didn't have a lot of time to do things, but when I did, it was for a purpose. There was always a purpose. And there's always stories behind something that I might have done. And some things that I did may mean nothing to anybody, and it may not be, an awesome piece of artwork like some of the things I see here, and it could be something that somebody throws away. But when I worked with it, and if I made it, there was thoughts that went into that, and there was memories and tears and laughter and smiles, and I always kept my family at heart as well. But yeah, it was definitely an expression for me, and it was definitely a journey throughout my whole entire law enforcement career with many different events that had happened. And I always tried to contribute with what I could in that sense. So whether an officer died or in officers that had breast cancer or other cancers. I tried to do something with my art.
And I think you responded to one of the questions about whether your coworkers know about your artistic abilities and how you're using that to, sort of like a therapeutic outlet. And how do they feel about that?
So,
have they asked you to help them?
Oh my goodness. So just very recently, it comes full circle. Yes, I'll start with the most recent, which was just a couple days ago. So several people in my class have gone through a lot of trauma, suicide, cancer. And another friend who a year ago was at this museum, Kevin and his wife, Stacia. And Kevin and I came on the academy together. And almost 30 years ago, I went through I was a single mom and went through kind of a rough period with that, and they helped me. They were very giving people, very non-judgmental, loving, embraced as if you're part of their family. A year ago, they were in this museum, and Kevin had a seizure. And they actually happened to be in this museum, not knowing it was closed, but through some connections, they were able to tour it, just them in the museum. And he had a seizure, and they didn't know what it was. And it was the first seizure, and he spent time in the hospital here in DC. After many tests, they found out he had brain cancer, terminal brain cancer. So throughout this whole journey for them, just a couple days ago, Stacia, we text each other, and she says, "Connie, can you please come over and help me with an art project that I want to do, her and Kevin together," because it was just their anniversary just a few days ago. And I said, of course I'll do anything. So it was this art project where she wanted to make a mold and a cast of their hands together, joined together. And I was very nervous because I didn't want to ruin anything. And we had the mold, we had the kits, and we were reading directions and can't get the container open. And Stacia's like, "Oh, let me get it open." She grabs it, and they're a very strong family. They work out a lot. Their daughters and son, very strong family. And so we were laughing, and Kevin was great. I mean, we're talking about the old days, about working on, the department. And he doesn't have very good use with one of his hands, so we had to pick the strong hand. And so we get the bucket, we get everything ready, and all the, the recipe for the mold and all that. And so they get their hands together and, dip it in, and, we wait all the minutes. And so I'm like, oh man, I hope it turns out. So we pour the plaster in and wait, have to wait a few hours. And I'm tapping it. The whole time we're talking, I'm tapping because I'm like, okay, please let all the air bubbles go out. And so Stacia, I said, this is what you're gonna have to do, because it was like 11 at night, or it was going to be 11 at night. It was already like 9 or 9:30, and they have not eaten dinner yet. And I said, I'm gonna let you guys go, and so you can eat. I said, but when you take this mold out, you just peel it away, it'll be fine, and if it doesn't work out, we'll do it again. And so the next day, she sent me a text with the picture, and it turned out perfect. I mean, their hands joined together. And for me, during this time, Kevin kept saying to me, "Connie, there's nobody else we would have asked but you. You were the one that was the perfect person to help with this. I feel like I didn't really do a whole lot, but it was the artist, I guess. I don't even consider myself a true artist, but the artist inside of me is what had them ask me to help. That's what it's all about, is doing it together and forming something, creating something that is gonna be there for the families for many, many years, and for those memories to be submitted and immersed into that piece of artwork. That's what it's about, is to helping to do something like that. I have always said, if you don't try something and get out of your comfort zone, you're not gonna know what it feels like. You're not gonna know if you have that talent, and you're not gonna know how it affects you and your family or strangers or the community you serve. It's a release of something. It can release emotions in so many different ways. It can be the worst thing ever. It can turn out horrible, but it can make you laugh. It can release maybe anger or frustration. It's gonna release something that's been built up inside of you. The job in law enforcement is unlike a job that it's hard to explain unless you work it. And I think even our own families and our children and mothers and fathers and everybody else, we can be there and we can go through all sorts of different emotions, but unless you're actually working that job, and every single day, whether you have a high vigilance type call or not, every day you have to be prepared. So every day there's stuff that gets inside of you. And the artistic expression can be anything from writing to photography to dancing. I think even trail running, ultra running. I think doing something outside of your comfort zone, whether you do it well or not, is gonna release things that are bottled up inside of you that could come out in worse ways, whether it be cancers or illness or depression or something. But yeah, I think expression of the arts definitely should be integrated on all levels of law enforcement and first responders.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Now, is there anything else that you would like to mention or talk about earlier parts of your career, or, I know you touch on a lot of different things, but if there's anything that you want to.
Yeah, there's lots of stories, and so stories again that I didn't really think about when you said about what my coworkers would say. So there's so many different stories that come full circle because people that I worked with, Keith Thompson, for example, very, very good coworker. We always bounce things off of each other. And I also started up running about 6 years ago, and Keith was paralyzed after 3 years on the job. And he was paralyzed for 20 some years, 25 years or more. And he actually still got to work on the department. And Keith had always wanted to be in an exoskeleton, which he did eventually, had an exoskeleton before he died, and he took some steps in that, and he ended up with about 628 steps in that exoskeleton. And every time he would walk in there, I'd say, "Do you have a Garmin? How many steps did you take?" And he's like, "What's a Garmin?" He didn't even know what a Garmin watch was. And I said, "Well, it keeps track of your steps." And so we would laugh about that. And his sons would help him out, and his son Reed in particular would help him walk in the exoskeleton. And I started running more and more and taking steps for Keith, and I would relay that, and I started doing 100 milers, and actually a year ago, I was trying to do 300 milers to do 628,000 steps for Keith. And with my running, I also love the outdoors, and I started to paint, things like that as well. So last year, November, I did a 100 miler, then December, I did a 100 miler. Then January, I tried what was called Hurt 100. And it was very emotional for me. And I do things that might look kind of stupid to other people, but I made a shirt, and I took a long time making this shirt, a front and back of the shirt, where I drew a lot of little pictures. I drew the exoskeleton. I drew the police car. I had the breast cancer patch for Cammie. I had cowboy hat for Mike that died. Cammie also died of breast cancer. They're all police officers. I had flowers for my family, my mom, my brother Joey that died. I had all these different things that I drew on my shirt. And I feel like I failed because I dedicated this to all these different people in law enforcement and my family. And made 80 miles. And I didn't even, the support with Hurt 100, it was in Hawaii. The support crew was so amazing. They really wanted me to succeed. And I didn't make the cutoff, but I never even went back to even thank them. And my shirt is, if I brought it, I was gonna show you, it's a mess. It's like everything just totally evaporated because of the rain and the water. And so I did all this stuff and, spent all this time drawing all these things because it was for me too, to try to get through this. And I was like, oh, I failed. My shirt is nothing. There's no pictures, whatever, hardly anything there anymore. And it took me about 3 months, and I went back to count all my steps because I wanted to do 628,000 with the 3 runs. And it took me a while, but I did count my steps, and I did end up with 633,000, even though I didn't make that 100 miles at Hurt 100. But one of the things I keep looking back at is when Keith took his steps and I made him a medal. I was like, you deserve a medal because you took all these steps. And it's like, I can do races, I can do all this stuff, and I get medals and whatever. But he deserved a medal for walking in that exoskeleton and the pain and suffering that he endured all those years. And I was honored. It was probably a dumb medal. I had the badge on there, and I made it out of clay and stuff like that and painted it and presented it to an event that my sister actually had organized called the Night of Hope. And I talked about taking steps for him, and I presented him with his medal, and he hung that and he sent me a picture, and he was so proud of that. And I was so proud I was able to present him with something that he deserved by taking steps for the first time after 20 some years of being paralyzed. And so yeah, lots of stories. And Keith did commit suicide a couple years ago. And but I was glad to have honored him with something that he did deserve, and again, to do something handmade for that involved a lot of emotion. And there's many stories like that, and many stories that have come full circle. It's just amazing. One of the guys I went to high school with, Bob Donlin, we were in art together. He went on and became, if you Google him and his artwork, he's all over the nation and had a lot of art done with respect to a lot of mental health issues and things like that. And Bob's brother, Kevin, was a police officer in narcotics, and I knew Kevin very well. And Bob had cancer, and I would go to Bob's house and help him. He couldn't walk very well, but I would help him move things or help him with some of the framing of his paintings, and he would teach me. He would teach me some of the art and some of his wisdom. He was a very wise person. And Bob died about over a year and a half ago of cancer as well. And Bob was chosen several years ago with the police department to be one of the artists to paint one of the horses of honor. Bob painted a horse for breast cancer for Don Pulleris, another officer that we worked with who died of breast cancer. And that horse is still standing in Southwest Assembly at our precinct. And I just think that, to me, before I got chosen for this, was one of the biggest honors in the world, to paint something for an officer and for the memory of the whole law enforcement community that you work with and live with. And Bob communicated through his mind with his paintings, and I do have some of those paintings. Carrie Orozco, when she died, she was another officer that was murdered. When Carrie died, I donated a painting of a mother and child, and I actually used beeswax and paint and stuff like that. And another officer, Christy Cook, purchased that painting, which I thought, oh, she's doing it to be nice or something. Christy purchased that painting, and before Bob died, Christy had gone to Bob's house and bought some of his artwork. And they talked about the horses of honor and how he actually drew, sketched out what he was going to do, and had all these drafts and talked about having the whole horse in his living room. And he worked on it, even going through all his cancer treatments. Bob gave Christy his sketches and drafts of that horse of honor. And Christy was very good friends with Dawn. In turn, Christy gave Bob the picture that she purchased from that fundraiser. And I was so embarrassed. I said, Christy, Bob is such a good artist. I go, oh my gosh, I don't know if he really wants that picture. When Bob died, his wife Terry invited me over with a few close friends for a ceremony to remember him by. And I was at his house, and almost everything was cleared out. And I went into his art room. And there on the wall was my picture. That his wife wanted to keep because it meant a lot to him as well. That's like my stuff being in a museum. My work, when I retired on the department in October of 2021, I went back to work 10 days later as a narcotics analyst and took the spot of Bob's brother, Kevin. And so like I said, there's so many things that come full circle. And so that's all part of this journey and part of the journey with the artwork. And when Carrie died, I also did something for Carrie's mom, Ellen Holtz, and I made a scrapbook. I didn't know Carrie very well, but my brother-in-law, Jeff, again, same academy class as Kevin, as Keith, and Jeff had to kill the perpetrator that killed Carrie. Before anybody knew what was happening with that event, I was at work. And I get a frantic phone call from my sister, Jeff's wife. And she was frantic. And I didn't even know what was going on. And she's like, who got shot? She thought Jeff got shot. And so I'm frantic and I'm trying to find out what's going on. And found out that Carrie got killed and Jeff killed the perpetrator. I thought, oh my gosh, for siblings, for Carrie's siblings, because I love all my siblings. I have 7 of them. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I felt so bad for them. And I put a scrapbook together again with the assistance of many, many people on the department. They sent memories and pictures and writings. And I went through these memories and I drove to places where Carrie would get her soda off of 42nd and Grover, and I would draw pictures and roses, and I made the cover of the scrapbook and painted it and did all this stuff. And there was even a news story on it, but I've never even watched it because I get embarrassed that it's not good enough. But I gave it to Ellen Holtz, Carrie's mom. And I said, please give this to their siblings, because if any of my siblings, if any of that happened, it would just be the worst thing. And Ellen, we keep in touch, and we always said we were going to take art lessons together, and Ellen's a very good artist herself. In June of this year, Ellen is the one that sent me the link to apply for this, and that's how I'm here. So again, everything keeps coming around, and there's stories to be told, and the stories are there. The stories can be passed down like artwork can be passed down. And everything that I have done has a story and has a purpose. And I'm hoping those memories continue to live on with different families and with my own family. I hope with what I do is a symbol of my character and my work ethic and my passion for my law enforcement job as well, to protect and serve the community that I worked for over 30 years. And I continue to try to do that. I do give narcotics presentations as well. And before one of my runs, which was just a 200-miler about 2 weeks ago, I gave a presentation with the Southwest community, and one of the members comes up to me and gives me a challenge coin with the St. Michael with the blue line flag. And I was like, I'm supposed to give those out? And I carried that with me. And that's where I brainstorm, and that's where it's given back to me. And I am just so honored to be part of the community that I was able to serve.